Hey folks, and welcome to another episode of Crit Hit Reviews, with your host, Arlyeon. On today's episode, I'll be talking about the review copy I received of Pugware's action-adventure RPG, Moonless Knight. Find out if I thought this title was eclipsed by its predecessors, or if this batch of Lovecraftian lunacy was a meteoric success. Nothing says alternate history Earth like a world history lesson gone mad with eldritch influences. That said, this particular rendition is fast approaching its finale, if only due to the world now serving as the arena for a pair of alien gods. In the face of this apocalyptic outcome, you take the role of a knight from the angelic Empire of Britannia, which is totes not England. Sent to Nobunaga's Dawn Empire in order to retrieve an artifact that might be used to save humanity. Unfortunately, when a faction of literal lunatic cultists decide to complicate the negotiations with some rampant homicide, you find yourself tasked with protecting Nobunaga so you can get back to the whole world-saving business. And no, not that Nobunaga, but he is totally a descendant of that Nobunaga. But anyways, if that sounds a little bit complicated, or like you might be missing something, it's because you definitely are, what with Moonless Knight being the fourth part in a quintology? I feel like there's a better word for it, but I definitely know it's not quintet. Anyway, whilst there is an optional introductory scene that you can opt into from the title screen that helps to further flesh out the game and tie it a bit more firmly to its predecessors, unless you've tackled them, there's likely more than a few moments that'll have you scratching at your head and wondering at the significance of certain bits of dialogue. Nonetheless, I'm not going to knock the overall narrative. As while as the casual player may miss some of the callbacks, the scenario does manage to stand on its own. Flavor-wise, I'd definitely say it leans a bit more on the action RPG elements, as whilst the horror notes that can be expected of something Lovecraft-influenced are still there, I found myself smirking more often than not at just how much of an uppity snarker the protagonist is. There's also some definitely interesting bits of lore to discover if you touch base with the NPC in your hub after every boss fight or major story update, as well as some intractable points on the map. Some particularly well-hidden ones offer some rather interesting bits of lore, all given. And whilst this title doesn't have much in the way of multiple endings, the tried and true "you can fail grievously at the outset of your adventure" remains a Pugware tradition. Go ahead, refuse that contract. But let's actually tackle the mechanics of the game, provided you decide you're up for making an eldritch contract with someone whose name is definitely not an anagram for an unfathomable aberration. First things first, Moonless Knight is an isometric action RPG, which houses a number of interesting quirks unique to this entry in the series. Quirks, which I was a bit slow to learn in some cases because you're never forced a tutorial, and all of the game's mechanics are explained in an optional readme segment in the in-game menu. Seriously, I beat a third of the game before I read it and realized I had a special attack. Anyways, you're tasked with roaming about the feudal-style castle you found yourself trapped in, discovering precious loot to plunder, and leaving behind a veritable mountain of corpses in your wake. Occasionally, you'll stumble across one of the game's boss battles, which tend to be pretty solid in regards to the variety between them, as well as their overall difficulty. Part of what I found interesting in Moonless Knight is the simple fact that you don't actually need to tackle all of them, as you only need to beat so many before the game allows you to proceed on to its next act. Still, I went out of my way to do them all, not only because I was having fun, but also because you then got the option to either kill or spare them. The former option provides you Yith Stones, a limited currency normally only found in chests, which you can use to power up your weapons by a notable amount. But the latter instead provides the player with some interesting quirks to the game, such as an overenthusiastic stalker who occasionally impales enemies for you, or someone who decides to prank you by booby-trapping all the chests you open. It's a neat, albeit unpredictable feature, but one I was glad I embraced, even though it had no bearing on the ending of the game. And this penchant for interesting subsystems also carries over to the combat, which is a good thing, given I spent the crux of my time building up a body count. For one thing, Usurper's guard system makes a reappearance here, which essentially serves as an extra regenerating health bar that is also tantamount to your stamina. That said, unlike Usurper, when you take damage to your health, your maximum guard is reduced by the same percent until you heal, which can be a bit trying at times since you have only a sparse handful of healing syringes at your disposal, at least until you visit a save crystal, which helpfully heals you up and also refills all your save syringes, and respawns everything you just finished ganking. That said, if you're feeling reckless, you can also intentionally just blow through your syringes and overheal yourself, which provides temporary max HP and guard, as well as doubling your HP for as long as it lasts. And if you master the art of blocking, dodging, and parrying, it can last a while. Even on their own, they're fairly useful abilities to master, not only because they help to keep you alive, but also due to the fact that perfectly executing a block, dodge, or parry lets you hit your enemies with some rather nasty and altogether lethal debuffs you can exploit. Though, good luck with the parries, since they're tied to the game's canceling system and a bit tricky to time. Though they do add a bit more overall to the combat, which is really good since comparatively your offensive options start out feeling a little bit lacking at first. Sure, you have 5 weapons, but you only have a singular slash animation for them, so combat ends up feeling a bit more deliberate. I can't count the number of encounters that degenerate into just tank and spank sessions. At least until I started accruing relics. See, the relics are nifty items you can use to bypass hazards, both to progress or just to get loot. But they also have some pretty nifty combat applications. For instance, there's a sweet scarf that lets you make ice blasts. Now, normally you'd be using this to freeze ice puddles to let you pass by them without dying, but those ice blasts can also be used to slow down enemies. There's a bow and arrow, which can be used to hit switches from afar, but also, more obviously, just to riddle an enemy with projectiles. But nothing was quite as satisfying to me as creeping up on an enemy in the middle of his friends and then yanking him face first into a greatsword while his friends are oblivious to the fact that I pulled him away. At the same time, I was a bit careful about them, if only because of the way your character levels up. See, the end result of enemies dying isn't actually what makes you stronger in this particular title, but rather the act of fighting them. Whether you're stabbing your foe, successfully defending blows, or even failing and getting your face punched into the wall, all of these actions earn you experience towards growing the associated stats and making you stronger. Not so much the relics. I mean, sure, you could just spend all your time hunting down the scrolls hidden through the keep as they give you a random level up to one of your stats, but they're fickle things, and I didn't want to accidentally end up handicapping myself in the long run. Well, more so than I already was, considering that I discovered the game's curse system and decided to do my entire playthrough while cursed to the high heavens. Or I guess the unfathomably low hells. Anyways, see, whenever you die or get hit by a certain enemy, you acquire a curse stack. Individually, they amplify the damage you take by a small amount, as well as boost your crit rate and drop rate. That said, they can stack up to 20 times, and I wasted no time whatsoever in scaling that up to max because I have some sort of chronic death wish. And despite the fact that I had the option of just finding a save crystal, fast traveling back to the hub because of the nifty fast track system, and then just, having a fancy tea ceremony to purge the curse, I just couldn't actually find it within myself to give up those perks, which is probably why I spent the first half of the game getting nearly murdered instantly by a number of enemies. Now, when it comes to graphics, there's a number of elements I appreciate. For instance, I really dug the environments and the fact that they not only had weather effects, but also lighting based on what time of day it was in real life. And whilst enemies were fun, what was really fun for me was just lopping a dude's heads off, or, bisecting him right in front of his friends. Honestly, if I'm gonna get nitpicky, the only thing that comes to mind are a certain late game area that has a jarring though still interesting, shift in its art style compared to everything adjacent to it, which makes it stand out a lot from the rest of the game. And then B would just be that the main changes to your weapons visuals when you upgrade them are just a shift in their palette. Otherwise though, it's good stuff, to say the least, and there's some actually decent visual screws and surprises waiting for you. Moving on to the sound work, I'm a fan of the music. That has as so far remained a universal constant of the series, and for the overall sound design, it's solid to boot. But my fucking god. Like, I know it's my fault for having the enemy whistle alerts active so I wouldn't get caught flat-footed by them, but it's really hectic when you walk into a group of 8 mobs and they all whistle angrily at you upon spotting you, and you run away only to trigger even more angry whistles, and then you possibly run some more. And like, I mean, there's not too many areas where you can hit orchestra levels of whistle blowing, but the sound will become ingrained in your brain by the game's end. That said, the footsteps are a neat feature though. Anyways, this was a lot of words, so let's wind things down. First off, at this point, I'll acknowledge as a veteran of the overall series, I am pretty invested in finding out where it's going narratively. And on that front, I was pretty happy, both with the way it further fleshed out its alternate history, as well as the latest twists and turns that were presented. And I genuinely enjoyed so much of what was introduced gameplay-wise. I loved turning the castle inside out as I progressed through the game, and I found it equally rewarding to earn both bits of treasure as well as a few hidden segments of lore. Plus, carving cultists in quarters or just running through stacks of books to see the pages fly everywhere never really got old for me. Gradually learning to use and ultimately abuse the systems which rest at the heart of its gameplay was a blast. All the same, I still found myself wishing there'd been more variety to the actual act of swinging the weapon. It's not a major nitpick, but it is one that sticks out in my brain, and part of why I'd say that while I do find this game to be a hit, especially given just the broad amount of enjoyable content there is to plunge into, it still left me wanting a bit more from it. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And for those interested in more indie reviews, developer interviews, podcasts, or our Monday TTRPG content whenever it resumes, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you know when there's a new release. There's also a Discord. You can click the link in the banner or description so you can be part of our community, the Crit Hit Cauldron. And lastly, if you'd like to help support the channel, we do have a coffee running now to help supplement funds for our lovely editor Rand, and make sure we can continue to provide quality content. Again, check the description and the banner for them links. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks. Refuse that contract. But fumble. No. What are you? No. Fumble, stop. Anyways, sorry about that, Rand.